Chapter 10. Von Ribbentrop's Nazi Foreign Office. I will introduce you to a Herr Schultz who is responsible for planning the lectures for your group on the international side of our movement, which means the relations with youth movements in foreign countries. I found on inquiring that in each national department, von Ribbentrop had skillfully collected young men who had lived in the various countries, or who spoke the language, whatever it was, including Japanese. It was really no wonder that these young men, most of them recently down from the university, were thrilled with their jobs. They felt a real importance in what they were doing, and they got the chance of traveling all over the world. They were among the most dangerous agents of the party, because on the whole they were intelligent and pleasant young men, who certainly did not give the impression of brutality or even aggressiveness. When I hear people say that Hitler's technique was to stir up political agitators in countries like Austria or the Sudetenland, and that he then got the nationals in that country to ask the Germans to come in, I always feel that leaves out the very important first step. The first people sent into these countries were these younger men, and indeed even schoolboys, and between them they prepared the way by enthusing certain elements among the youth in the countries they visited. Into that prepared situation the agitator went and found ready-made a number of keen disciples. As I left the building, I met a man I had known for many years coming up the steps. To my surprise, he was in civilian clothes instead of the SS uniform he was wearing a few months before. He looked ill and tired, and when we had finished our greetings, he said, "Are you by any chance free? Because if so, we might lunch together at the Adlon." After the waiter had gone, I turned to my friend. "Why are you in civilian clothes? Have you left the SS, or are you on leave?" He was silent for a moment, and I was very conscious of the strain in his face and voice as he replied, "I am so ashamed at what I have seen the SS men do that I cannot bring myself to put on the uniform again," he said. "And the fact that I have been ill gives me a chance of leave while I decide what I am going to do." "If you will forgive me for saying so," I replied, "I have always wondered how you came to be in the SS. But tell me, what has happened to make you want to leave?" "I was sent on a special mission to Vienna and other Austrian towns," he said, "and although I entirely agree that Austria should be joined to Germany, what I saw of the treatment of the Jews there made me feel I could not go on. It literally made me ill, or else it was the worry as to what I should do. I am not fit for the army, and it may be difficult for me to get another job if I leave the SS." As he said this, 2 more SS men, one of whom recognized this man, came to the next table. The conversation changed at once, but all through the lunch I realized that the man was ill and nervous. He had obviously played false to himself at the beginning of the revolution, as I rather suspected, and now found himself trapped in the betrayal of his own judgment. At 10:45 that night, I was sitting in the lounge of the Kaiserhof, drinking coffee with an English friend, when I saw the tall, heavy figure of Herr Hühl approaching. Ignoring the subject we were supposed to discuss, he plunged straight in. "Your newspapers have no imagination at all about the reunion with Austria." We protested that perhaps he meant that our papers did not agree with Germany's brutal methods. "It is not a case of agreeing," he said, with some sign of anger, but obviously with great sincerity. "They just will not see what is happening because they do not like it. I tell you," he continued, "I went into Austria with the Führer, and it was the most wonderful experience of my life. There were thousands upon thousands of them, all on their knees in the streets with tears streaming from their eyes." "I wonder," I said, "whether there were as many inside their houses, also on their knees, but in fear rather than gratitude." "Ugh," he said, "that is not true. Why must you always look on the bad side of our pictures? I just could not believe it when I came back from Vienna and read your English papers. No imagination or understanding, just your incessant attitude of a governess scolding." Then he suddenly burst out, "You should have seen the Führer tonight. I have just had dinner with him in the chancellery. and afterward he kept going over to the map of Austria and holding it in his hands and saying, 'Tell me again, Huel, is it true that Austria has come back to Germany, that Austria is mine?' 'Yes, but look here,' we both exclaimed. 'What did Hitler promise? His memory is very short.' 'You do not understand the Führer,' he said emphatically. 'No, that's true enough,' we exclaimed, and I saw an angry look cross his face as he realized we were smiling. 'You do not seem to realize that in any national or international situation there can be what Hitler calls vital organic developments. If a complete change comes, as in Austria, from within, then of course the Führer must meet that change. He cannot be bound by a situation which has completely altered.' Then, sipping his beer and lighting a cigarette, he continued, 'That is why the democracies are never able to lead. They are so slow, and live on theory instead of following life. Well, anyhow, no negotiations with the democracies would have given Austria back to us.' My friend Joan then asked, 'I suppose you agree with those who say that a National Socialist is a man of action first, and excuses afterward?' He laughed and said coarsely, 'And why not?' 'Yes, Herr Huel, we are well aware that Herr Hitler is a man of action,' I added. 'He jolly well has to be,' retorted Herr Huel. 'For 20 years there was the chance to deal with Germany and problems in Europe on a reasonable basis, but nothing had been done. Now the Führer is right. The only thing to do is to take action. The world is very angry for a time, and then gradually everyone begins to see that it is all very reasonable, and things settle down. That is why I am sure the Führer must go into the Sudetenland this autumn.' 'What do you mean?' we both exclaimed in response to this blatant announcement. 'Well,' he said, 'just that the world is already angry about Austria, and it might be better to get this Sudetenland affair over in the same year, and then perhaps after 6 months or so we could seriously settle down to being friends and making peace in Europe. There can be no peace until these wrongs are put right, and as you will not help put them right, the Führer must, and it would be better to get all these things over and then have some chance of peace.' He was, I think, aware of our surprise at the frank brutality of this announcement, and so trying to recover himself, he went on. 'Of course it is also true that even if the Führer did not decide to annex the Sudetenland himself, the situation there is becoming so tense that the Sudetenland will come to us if we do not soon go there.' 'But,' said my friend, 'is it not true that your party sends Nazis into places like the Sudetenland to stir up agitations and try to cause trouble?' 'Far from it,' said Herr Huel. 'It is our party that every morning clears away the swastikas on the walls and pavements, and also for 3 mornings running it has had to clear away triumphal arches put up in the night by enthusiastic Sudetenland National Socialists. We have the Führer's orders to prevent agitation, but we can do nothing against the passionate desire of those who are exiled to come home to the Reich.' We could stand this no longer. So I said, 'Look here, Herr Huel, you really do take us for fools.' To this he gave a coarse laugh and said, 'Well, it is not very easy for you to prove you are right, and I happen to have been in the Sudetenland for some time.' A long and acrimonious discussion followed, but we felt it an obvious waste of time talking to him, so finally decided to discuss the conference. He agreed. 'It is well after midnight now, so perhaps we had better discuss the plans for your party. I have had a letter from von Ribbentrop to say that he had seen you in London. I gather he suggested that we make some changes on one day of your program.' 'For heaven's sake, don't tell me that in spite of all I said to him, von Ribbentrop still suggests we don't discuss theology,' I said, 'but that we go and see your new Autobahn roads instead.' 'Well, yes,' said Herr Huel, 'that is what he suggests. You see, as I said, our movement is a movement of action rather than of theory, and he thinks that if you want to understand National Socialism, you should see things we have made.' 'Look here, Herr Huel,' I told Herr von Ribbentrop in London that I am not bringing over people like the members of my party to look at roads. So I warn you that we shall not go on excursions of that kind, even if you do arrange them. I may add that the main thing you Nazis seem to be creating is a situation in Europe that will end in destruction and war. We are much more interested in finding out the theories underlying such a dangerous action than in studying your roads, which might be valuable to you in war, but do not interest me or my friends just now. It is extremely vital for the rest of the world to know what it is you are going to train a whole generation of Germans to believe, because their actions may affect us all. Hewell ended by agreeing to the program we had planned. As he was preparing to go, Jones said to him, "Where did you learn to talk English so well?" For even if his vocabulary was limited and his slang incessant, he was obviously completely at ease talking English. "Oh, I was a traveler for a British firm in the Far East. Now I am liaison officer between von Ribbentrop and the Führer of the German Reich. You don't wonder I think National Socialism is a good idea and worth defending at all costs," he added cynically, but honestly. We talked for some time about the von Ribbentrop crowd, the really intelligent young university men who tried all the time to suppress their intellectual and moral judgment and to sacrifice their integrity in order to gain power. Then there were the enthusiastic types who were used for doing propaganda with the more gullible type of visitor. They were most useful in acting as guide to all the things foreigners were meant to see. They were word perfect on all the stock Nazi answers to every sort of question. Then there was the delicate gentleman of the group who was valuable on social occasions, but who was becoming ill through his betrayal of his own finer instincts. And finally there was the von Ribbentrop and Hewell type. No longer had they just merchandise to sell, now they were controlling a vast army of agents throughout the world. In South America and India, Japan and Holland, East and West, their agents traveled round the globe, and wherever they went, it was to create other agents, sometimes nationals of those countries who would prepare the way for Hitler's doctrine and make fanatical disciples. As I tried to get to sleep that night, only with difficulty could I recall the other picture. Quiet, carpeted corridors, sedate porters, intelligent, cultured, but rather old and tired civil servants, and one of them saying, "We are a kind of museum. The real direction of international affairs is over yonder. We have become a museum because we failed after 20 years to find any way of peace with your country for Europe." They were powerless, and I suspect their counterparts in our diplomatic service were equally powerless. They did not even see the significance of what was happening, of young, eager missionaries, albeit with a devil's creed, speeding to the far corners of the globe to seek out the young who have no religion, and the older men who are traitors.